What's up, Omnibus collectors? Riley here, and today we're going to be talking about my top 10 most wanted DC New 52 Omnibus editions. So stay tuned. Alright, y'all, top 10 DC most wanted New 52 Omnibus. There's a lot of good stuff from the New 52, so I've got a lot of books that I'm really excited to talk about. This is kind of a spin-off on last Thursday's show on the Omnibus Collectors Network, so shout out to that channel. That's the other channel that I do work on. I join a bunch of other awesome YouTubers, and every single week we do multiple videos talking about comics, manga, anime, movies, TV shows, video games, all kinds of geeky stuff. So if that sounds cool to you and you enjoy what I do on this channel, then definitely check them out over there. Also, as always, I have to give a huge shout out to my Patreon subscribers. You guys are awesome and help me to make this channel what it is. If you enjoy what I do on this channel and also want to support and become part of the Patreon family, there is a link down below, and that's going to take you to my Patreon where you can see all the awesome benefits that you get if you wind up supporting me. But most importantly, the biggest benefit of all is you get to support me to make my channel better. So I hope that you'll consider it. And if you are new to my channel or you've seen my videos before and haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting that subscribe button down below and hitting that bell so you'll be notified by all the awesome videos that I make every week. I typically put out 3 videos a week, so a lot of great content for comic geeks and manga lovers alike. Anyway, let's get started into this video. I've got 10 DC New 52 Omnis that I want to talk about that are series that I love and would love to see put into these omnibus editions. Now, we already have a bunch of New 52 Omnis. I made kind of a makeshift list, and I know that I'm missing things. We've got Batman by Snyder Volume 1, Batman and Robin, Batman Eternal, Grayson, Nightwing, Harley Quinn, Batgirl, Batwoman, so a lot of Batman-related stuff. Action Comics is coming out with one, Swamp Thing has an omnibus coming out, Animal Man, Deathstroke, Red Hood and the Outlaws, The Flash, Aquaman, Wonder Woman. So there's a lot of those, and then there's also the issue 1 omnibus, the issue 0 omnibus, the Villains Month omnibus, and the Future's End omnibus. And then also some oversized hardcovers like Superman Unchained and Dial H and Green Arrow by Jeff Lemire that are only oversized hardcovers, not released in omnibus or anything. There's a lot of great oversized collections of New 52 material. Even some absolute editions out there like Court of Owls and the Wonder Woman by Brian Azzarello run as well. But there's a lot of them that have not been given the chance at an oversized edition, have not been given an omnibus as of yet. And I know that DC is still producing some New 52 Omnis by the upcoming Batwoman, Batgirl, Nightwing, and Action Comics books. We know that they're still putting out some DC New 52 material in oversized hardcover editions. But these are ones that I think that they should also do. Now, most of these are going to be ones that I loved, series that I loved, but I'm also taking in for consideration how much other people enjoyed these books and what the chances are that these books actually happen. So it's not purely, there's some series that I would love to see that I did not put on this list just because maybe I didn't think they would make a good hardcover edition or some other reasons. Anyway, enough talk. Let's go ahead and get into the top 10 Omnis that I wish would happen from DC's New 52. Number 10, and this is probably the most selfish one that I have on this list, and that is I, Vampire. Now, this is one a lot of people didn't hear about and a ton of people did not read. I, Vampire was one of the first wave of New 52 books, and it was one that when it first got announced, I was not intending on picking up at all. I did not know the creators, Joshua Hale-Fialkov and Andrea Sorrentino. I didn't have any idea who the character was of Andrew Bennett. I'd never heard of I, Vampire before. And I was like, yeah, I'm not picking that one up. But then the preview came out and we got to see some of the interior artwork. And like I said, I'd never heard of Andrea Sorrentino at this point. I don't think that he had done much comic book work. So this was one of his first breakout series, and his artwork was and still is astonishing. And that was the main thing that sold me on it. But on top of the great artwork that was in here from Sorrentino, the series would continue and have a really fantastic plot line. Basically, the series follows Andrew Bennett, this 600-year-old vampire that has the body and appearance of a 20-something-year-old man, as he's trying to fight against his former lover, Mary Queen of Blood, as she's building an army of vampires to take over the world. So throughout the series, Andrew is trying to gather troops, gather forces, gather friends and partners to try and fight against Mary Queen of Blood to stop her from trying to take over the world. So it's a pretty simple plot, but Josh Fialkov does a great job with these characters and with the fantastic artwork by Andrea Sorrentino. It's a really wonderful book to look at all the way from beginning to end. And it's also astonishing that this series, given, like I said, it wasn't from a big writer or a big artist or even dealing with a really well-known character, it was able to last through 19 issues. So this omnibus would wind up collecting issues 0 through 19 plus I think issues 7 and 8 of Justice League Dark actually tied into the story of the series a little bit. If you haven't seen or heard or even know anything about iVampire, I highly recommend you checking it out if it's available to read online or if you can find the trade paperbacks for cheap. It was a fantastic series, and like I said, not many people wound up reading it, but thankfully DC allowed it to go on for 19 issues plus that 0 issue, and I'm very thankful for them for doing that. Number 9, and this is another divisive one, but hear me out. I'm mostly saying this one for the artwork. It's Detective Comics by Tony Daniel. Now, Tony Daniel had started doing, he did a lot of Batman artwork back when Grant Morrison was doing the Batman R.I.P. story arc. And that's where I really first started seeing his artwork and paying attention to him as an artist. And I loved his work on that series. I thought he did a beautiful job illustrating Batman and all of the surrounding characters and stuff. And then after Morrison left, he wound up doing a short little mini event called The Battle for the Cowl. He wrote and drew this one. It had beautiful artwork, though the story was definitely lacking. Now after that, there was a short story arc on Batman by Judd Winnick, but Tony Daniel would eventually come in and start as the primary writer on the ongoing Batman title. Meanwhile, Grant Morrison moved over to Batman and Robin, and Detective Comics was taken over. Around that time was when Greg Rucka's Batwoman happened, and then eventually Scott Snyder would come in and do the Detective Comics Black Mirror run. So he wound up writing a couple of different arcs on Batman. We have trade paperbacks for Life After Death and also the Eye of the Beholder arcs. He did a lot of the artwork for both of those storylines, but he did have some filler artists. I think Gilliam March jumps in as well. I might have mispronounced that name. And then he wound up taking over whenever the New 52 started on Detective Comics. And over there, he did the first year worth of issues, as well as an annual and the 0 issue. And again, he had some filler art from other artists at the time. There was a lot of people that did actually like that run. I know that I mentioned I'm not the biggest fan of his run on Detective Comics, but there are a lot of people that enjoyed it. And it's mostly well known for this being the story that took the Joker's face from him. So I would love to see this collected again, mostly because of how beautiful Tony Daniel's artwork on Batman and all the Batman titles was. And it would be a nice little companion to have on the shelf next to the Batman by Morrison Omni set and the Batman by Snyder New 52 Omnibus. Moving on to number 8, we've got Demon Knights. Now this was another one of those kind of unsung hidden gem titles of the New 52. I know this one was a little more popular, at least, than iVampire, but again, it was something that wasn't by a big A-list writer. We had Paul Cornell, who had done a couple things from DC, such as a fill-in arc on Batman and Robin, and he did the Knight and Squire miniseries, along with, he had the Saucer County story over at Vertigo that was ongoing, but he wasn't a big A-list writer. And then we had artist Diogenes Neves doing beautiful work on this, but it also didn't have a big A-list character at the front of it, with the headlining character being the demon Etrigan. The series also took place back during the Middle Ages, so it's not like it was something that was really having an effect on the rest of the DC New 52. But it was something that I know that myself and a lot of other people really loved, because it was a really fantastic series that was giving us something completely different than anything else that was on the shelves. So the series followed Etrigan and a team of other characters, including Shining Knight, Madame Xanadu, and Vandal Savage, as they went through adventures during the Middle Ages. It did have ties that would connect to more modern stuff, including ties to the new volume of Stormwatch during the New 52. The series would eventually, after being written by Paul Cornell, get taken over by Robert Venditti, and it would end after 23 issues. So, like iVampire, it was given a pretty good chance by DC and a pretty extensive run, considering that given it didn't have A-list writer or protagonist, for all intents and purposes, this is a series that could have failed after 6 issues. But I'm really happy that DC gave it a chance and let it keep going on for 2 whole years worth of material. Now, if you haven't tried it out yet, I don't think there's much of a chance chance that this ever gets collected in Omnibus, but one of the big reasons that I wanted this on my list is because the 3 paperback editions are really hard to find for a good price now. They've been out of print for a while, and I was lucky to find them recently for a decent price. But if you can't find them for a good price and you're intrigued by the concept here, I would highly recommend that you check them out digitally if possible, because it's definitely a series worth reading. Number 7, and this is one that I don't have physical copies of, and is a little bit of a tricky one to map as well, and that is Earth 2. Now, the series started out written by James Robinson. It was a pretty big deal because from the New 52 so far, we did not have those classic Justice Society characters. We didn't have Alan Scott, we didn't have Jay Garrick. There was a lot of characters that were missing, but one of the big things that people were crying out for was to see the Justice Society brought back. And this series, in an alternate universe, was able to bring those characters back into relevance. So it doesn't take place in the prime Earth that the New 52 takes place in, but it does deal with all those characters, and it was pretty cool because we got to have this kind of continuity-free world where anything could happen. Now, Robinson did the series for about a year and a half, and then we saw Tom Taylor take over. And Taylor, of course, at the time was known for his work on Injustice, and he still is, as he's doing new Injustice comics now. And he started doing even more work in introducing more new versions of classic characters and intriguing new versions of those new characters to make for a really fantastic title. Now, where it gets a little bit tricky is that the last few issues of the ongoing series wind up tying into the beginning of the Earth 2 World's End series. And then World's End winds up tying into Future's End, and then Future's End winds up tying into the Earth 2 Society series. So at the very least, the omnibus that I'm saying is on my wish list here is of that first series, and at least the runs by Robinson and Taylor. So that would include the first 29 issues plus the 0 issues, the first couple of annuals, and then issues 15.1 and 15.2 from the Villains Year event. And at number 6, we've got Justice League Dark. Now, this is one that I think has a really big chance of actually happening. We've seen the Justice League Dark appear in some of the animated movies. There's still talks of a Justice League Dark movie actually happening, like a live-action one. And Justice League Dark has come back as a title during the Rebirth era of DC, written by James Tynion IV, and I believe it's starting to be taken over by Ram V. And it's very well done, very well received as well. Now, the original Justice League Dark title kind of came out of nowhere, and it was just an idea of a team where DC was able to kind of shove all of their outliers, all these characters that had been missing from the DC universe for a while, mostly being featured across Vertigo titles. So we saw John Constantine, for instance, come here. We had Black Orchid and Madame Xanadu. We even had some characters from the DC universe, like Deadman and Zatanna, become involved in this team, and it made for a really interesting book. Now, Peter Milligan wrote the first 6 issues, but Jeff Lemire would eventually take over, and it was when he came on the book that I feel like it really hit its stride and became something really awesome and really special. And I really love this title, and I do think that it deserves to have the omnibus treatment. Now, during issues 22 through 29, it did cross over into the Trinity of Sin storyline and the Forever Evil Blight storyline. So in the mapping of this, I would say it's kind of optional to have issues 22 through 29, because I don't think that there would be room to include all of Trinity of Sin and all of Forever Evil Blight in there. So could possibly just collect issues 0 through 21 plus 30 through 40, annuals 1 and 2, and then the Future's End issue. Number 5 is Aquaman by Jeff Parker, or Aquaman New 52 Volume 2. Now, we do have the Aquaman by Jeff Johns omnibus, and this is some fantastic material, and I'm so happy that they gave this an omnibus edition, but I know that there are a lot of people out there that would love to see a follow-up omnibus for this, collecting all of Jeff Parker's run. Now, Jeff Parker only wrote issues 26 through 47, so it'd be a pretty thin omnibus edition. He did write a couple of other Aquaman-related things, but I would also include the further Aquaman material, which is why I call this New 52 Volume 2, to basically encapsulate everything that happened with that character and his franchise until Dan Abnett takes over, because the last few issues of the New 52 run wind up being Dan Abnett leading into his Rebirth run. So this would potentially include issues 26 through 47 and annuals 1 and 2, as well as Aquaman and the Others issues 1 through 11, which is the spin-off title that was written by Dan Jurgens, Future's End Aquaman number 1, Future's End Aquaman and the Others number 1, Swamp Thing number 32, which is a story that featured Aquaman, and also material from Secret Origins 2 and 5, which were, I believe, both written by Jeff Parker. So if you haven't read Parker's material on Aquaman yet, I highly recommend it because he does not skip a beat taking over from Johns. If you enjoyed what Jeff Johns was doing, Parker basically just comes on directly after that and kills it. And I knew he was going to kill it on this series because at the time I was already very familiar with a lot of great work from him over at Marvel, including Red Hulk and his Thunderbolts run. So it was without a doubt that he would just absolutely annihilate it on this series. Now, this would also include the Cullen Bunn run on Aquaman, which I know pretty much everyone absolutely hated, but it would feel weird to have everything but that collected in Omnibus. And in my mind, this would lead into, like I was saying, Aquaman by Dan Abnett, which would be a 2-volume Omnibus set collecting all of Dan Abnett's Rebirth run on Aquaman. Number 4, Batman by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, Volume 2. Now, we've had Volume 1 for a little while. Got this fat guy right here. And that one collects the first 33 issues of the ongoing Batman series, as well as a couple of annuals and some other tie-in issues that happen around the time. Now, we've been waiting for a little while, but I think that it's pretty much something that is going to happen. It's just a matter of when DC decides to actually publish it. And that's because it's Batman, their most popular character without a doubt, their character that sells the best, and it's written by Scott Snyder, who has been one of their golden boys since he started writing for them. Now, I know that the latter half of the Batman series was not the most well-received material. This is the Endgame arc, which was pretty well received, but then that led into the whole Super Heavy and Bloom story, where we have Commissioner Gordon wearing the rookie armor, acting as Batman while Bruce was out of commission. Now, this leads into the end of that series, and then eventually Tom King takes over as the writer of Batman during Rebirth, but this could also include some material that follows the New 52 run, including the Batman Last Night on Earth miniseries, where Snyder and Capullo were reunited to tell what is supposed to be the final Batman story. So if this collects issues 34 through 52, as well as annuals 3 and 4, the Future's End one-shot, possibly the Rebirth one-shot, the Batman sneak peek, back when the DCU era was starting, they did a lot of sneak peek storylines leading into some of the big events that were going to be happening. And then material from Detective Comics 27, which was written by Scott Snyder. And we could also include the 3-issue Last Night on Earth miniseries. That would bring us to a total of 26 issues. Mind you, a few of these issues are double-sized in length and are extra-sized in length, but it would probably still be a little bit thinner than the Batman Volume 1, which is fine. Now, also during this time, Snyder did write AllStar Batman. He wasn't joined by Greg Capullo. The first arc, he was joined by John Romita Jr., who had just moved over to doing some work over at DC. The second story arc, he was reunited with both Jock and Francesco Francavilla, who he had worked with on The Black Mirror. And then on the third arc, he was joined by Rafael Albuquerque, his partner from American Vampire. So these 14 issues, you could shove them in here, but that would make it quite a large book at 50 issues, and like I said, a lot of those would be double-sized issues. And not only would it be a large book, but it would start collecting a lot of material that's not part of the New 52, nor is it part of the work that Snyder did with Capullo. So I think that the best thing to do with that would maybe combine the Black Mirror story arc and Gates of Gotham with the All-Star Batman material as kind of a companion volume, because I couldn't see them doing All-Star by itself, because that would be a small 14-issue hardcover. And those other stories that I've mentioned, at least Black Mirror, does not have an oversized hardcover. It has an Absolute Edition and a standard size, but not oversized. But they did do Gates of Gotham oversized, so there's that. Anyway, I could talk about Batman stuff for a little while. This is a run that I really care about, and I would really love to see more of Snyder's work collected. I know that I might be in the minority on this in enjoying the latter part of his Batman run, but I enjoyed it enough that I would love to have all of his Batman work and all of his DC work now that he's kind of wrapping that up across omnibus editions. And this, of course, would also lead towards the Metal event, but that took place during Rebirth, so that's an omnibus to talk about in a different video. Now, number 3. And this one I don't have any physical copies of, but this would be Green Lantern by Robert Venditti. Now, Venditti was given some really huge shoes to fill whenever he took over on Green Lantern, because Geoff Johns had just wrapped up his years-long run. And not only did Johns do a lot of work to bring the character back into prominence, especially Hal Jordan, after he was gone for so long from the title, but he also implemented a lot of new aspects to the Green Lantern books that have maintained significance through the current Green Lantern books, as well as making appearances in film, in cartoons, in video games, and all kinds of other media, with his whole emotional spectrum, and the Red Lanterns, Yellow Lanterns, Blue Lanterns, and all that stuff. So, like I said, Venditti had a lot of work cut out for him to kind of make his place on the Green Lantern books, and he did start off a bit rocky. I didn't really enjoy his Green Lantern run when he started, but eventually he really did find his footing, and it's obvious that DC felt so as well, because they wound up giving him a Rebirth Green Lantern book that he would write for another 50 issues. But like I said about some of the Batman stuff, that's a book for another video. So his run on the Green Lantern was really caught up in a lot of crossovers, so when mapping this out, I had to consider all of those crossovers as well, which made me have to split it across 2 separate volumes. So the map that I have here is that Volume 1 would include issues 21 through 34 of the Green Lantern title, as well as 23.1, which was a Relic one-shot, and annuals numbers 2 and 3. As well, it would include Green Lantern Corps issue 24, as well as 31 through 33. And these were part of the Lights Out crossover, and then there was another small crossover that happened a little bit later in there. And then issues of Green Lantern New Guardians, issue 23 and 24, Red Lanterns number 24, and then maybe include also Green Lantern Corps issues 21 through 23, as well as 25 through 27, because Venditti did co-write those issues with writer Van Jensen at the time. Volume 2 of Venditti's Green Lantern would include issues 35 through 52 and annual number 4 of Green Lantern Corps issues 35 through 37, and all these tie-ins are part of the Godhead story. New Guardians 35 through 37, Red Lanterns 35 through 37, Sinestro 6 through 8, Godhead number 1, and the Green Lantern sneak peek, which is the same kind of thing as that Batman sneak peek I mentioned earlier. So the first volume would be somewhere between 24 and 30 issues, and then the second volume would be 32 issues. The second volume starts right at that Godhead event, so it's not really possible for me to move anything from that one over to the first one to try and make them even, and that's why I mentioned that Green Lantern Corps, some of those issues could also be put into the first omnibus to kind of even it out, because they were, like I said, written by Venditti along with Van Jensen at that time. Number 2. Justice League by Geoff Johns. This one is one I'm so surprised that this has not happened yet. This is something that seems so obvious. This is the headlining book of the entirety of the New 52, with Geoff Johns, their biggest writer, and a whole cast of their biggest artists, like Jim Lee, working on this book, where Geoff Johns was reintroducing us to the Justice League and giving them a new origin. And not only that, but reintroducing us to a lot of side characters and a lot of their biggest villains. And for some reason, the only parts that we've gotten in an oversized hardcover edition are the first 12 issues, the origin story arc, as well as the story that directly followed it, as well as this Justice League Darkseid War Saga Omnibus, which collects the last year or so worth of issues on the title. So I'm wanting to see the rest of it, everything before Darkseid War, collected into a couple of omnibus editions. Now this one I had to do some careful mapping again because of crossovers, and what I got was that the first volume would include issues 0 through 21, as well as Aquaman numbers 15 and 16, and would also include the first 5 issues of Justice League of America. So the Aquaman issues are part of the Throne of Atlantis crossover, and Justice League of America was a series that Geoff Johns started up, I believe with artist Brian Hitch, was a secondary Justice League team at the time, and eventually that would cross over with Justice League in the Trinity of Sin storyline, which would start up the second volume. Also present in the first volume would be the entire Shazam story that he did as backups during his Justice League run. That story was also the full feature of issue 0 and issue 21 of Justice League. I know that Geoff Johns is doing an ongoing Shazam series now, but this one is set during the New 52, and I think it deserves to be part of this run instead of looped in with a possible potential omnibus for the Rebirth Shazam title, which maybe it could be included with that as well. Now, volume 2 of the Geoff Johns Justice League Omnibus would include issues 22 through 39, as well as 23.4. It would also include issues 22 and 23 of Justice League Dark, and issues 6 and 7 of Justice League of America, as well as the Forever Evil event, issues 1 through 7. So similar to the way that Jeff Johns' Green Lantern Omnis are, in that they collect the entire main part of the Blackest Night event, this would do the same thing for Forever Evil, because that Forever Evil event is really just a big portion of John's run on Justice League, and it would be really weird to not have that included here. So altogether, the first volume winds up being 29 issues, the second one winds up being 30 issues, so they should be about the same size as the Darkseid War Omnibus, so lined up pretty nicely on the shelves. Now, before I get into my number one choice, I have some honorable mentions. These are some titles that I think would also be pretty fun to see in an omnibus or an oversized hardcover edition for one reason or another. And those are more Batman books, basically. Detective Comics by John Layman, not based on how good or bad his writing is, but I really like oversized Batman editions, and it would be really cool to have a Tony Daniel one and a John Layman one, and then we already have the Francis Manapul and Buccellato run in an oversized hardcover. Batman the Dark Knight by David Finch and Greg Hurwitz, and that one's on here mainly because of the awesome artwork that we see throughout the series. Another honorable mention would be Batman and Robin Eternal, the follow-up to the Batman Eternal storyline that we already have in Omnibus. Robin/We Are Robin, which together would make a pretty decent little series, especially considering we have almost every other Batman side character in an omnibus or getting an omnibus, with Batgirl, Batwoman, Nightwing, and Grayson, and Red Hood. The only other thing aside from Robin would be Batwing and maybe Catwoman. Frankenstein Agent of Shade, which is another one that, like I, Vampire, is me just being selfish. It would not be big enough for an omnibus edition, but I would love to see an oversized hardcover with that run, written by Jeff Lemire with Alberto Ponticelli on artwork, because it was such fun and fantastic comics. And then, of course, the rest of the GL franchise, meaning somehow fitting Green Lantern Corps, New Guardians, Red Lanterns, Larfleeze, Sinestro, and then the later miniseries like Lost Army and Edge of Oblivion into a series of comprehensive omnibus editions to join on the shelf with the Jeff Johns and Robert Venditti omnibus editions. And then, of course, I don't have any Superman on my list here, but I would love to see some action comics by Greg Pak and a bunch of different stuff. Greg Pak did a lot of Superman work around this time, and a lot of it was really cool, so I'd love to see that in an omnibus as well. But now, my number one choice for my most wanted New 52 omnibus edition is Forever Evil. I mentioned this event during the Justice League by Jeff Johns part, but Forever Evil was a fantastic storyline. Johns' Justice League was definitely kind of meandering in the middle there, but once it started getting into Forever Evil, it was firing on all cylinders, and Johns did just a fantastic job with that event in bringing forth really sinister villains and doing things that had a lasting effect on the New 52 and the DC Universe until basically the New 52 came to its end. There was a lot of really cool stuff that dealt with the Injustice Society coming from Earth 3 and wreaking havoc, and villains kind of taking over for a while. It led towards the whole storyline where Lex Luthor winds up joining the Justice League for a little bit. Just fantastic storytelling. Now, this is kind of hard to map, and it would definitely be a really fat omnibus, which is cool because all of DC's event omnibus are pretty large books to begin with, but I would have to cut something out of here in order to make it basically not 70 issues worth of material. But this would, in my map, would collect issues 1 through 7 of Forever Evil, Forever Evil Argus 1 through 6, Forever Evil Arkham War 1 through 6, and the Forever Evil Aftermath Batman vs. Bane one-shot, Forever Evil Rogues Rebellion 1 through 6, as well as Justice League 24 through 30, Justice League of America 8 through 14, and Suicide Squad 24 through 30. Optionally, we could also include some of the villains issues, so it would be 23.4, which is the Bane issue, 23.3 of Flash, which is the Rogues issue, Justice League 23.4, which was, I forget which character that one was, but it ties into some of the other stuff, and then Justice League of America 7.1 and 7.4, which again kind of tie into some of the characters that were involved with the Forever Evil event and stuff. Now, the stuff that I'm talking about having to cut out, because altogether that makes up for a pretty large omnibus, would be the Blight storyline, and that already has its own separate hardcover, but basically a bunch of the Dark titles, they were titles that belonged to the dark side of the DC New 52, crossed over into this little mini event, and that was Justice League Dark 24 through 29, Constantine 9 through 12, Trinity of Sin Pandora 6 through 9, and Trinity of Sin Phantom Stranger 14 through 17. So the choice would either be to remove Blight and just let it stay on its own, which it does, like I said, have its own hardcover anyway, or split Forever Evil into 2 volumes. But I would prefer to just let Blight exist on its own and maybe include those issues as part of something else, somewhere else, and just keep that initial mapping that I said for Forever Evil. If you haven't read the Forever Evil event, it is a fantastic storyline. I really loved it. It had great impact on the DC universe at the time, and it had a lot of great twists and turns and cool versions of characters that you'd see coming from Earth 3. Just a lot of great stuff in there. I think it was John's really doing some of his best work on the Justice League title during the New 52. So those are my 10 picks and some honorable mentions for New 52 Omnibus editions that I wish would get made. Now there's a lot of stuff that I didn't mention and a ton of series that I'm sure other people really love, so if I didn't mention some of your favorite titles, sound off down below, and if you have maps for those that you would like to discuss as well, mention those in the comments too. Go ahead. And if I mentioned some of your favorite books or any of these books are ones that you would pick up if DC decided to release them, then comment down below with that information as well, because I'm curious to know who agrees with me. Would you buy I, Vampire? Would you want Demon Knights? That's what I'm curious about. I want to have that feedback. So let me know in the comments down below. Now, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for spending the time with me and watching this and having fun with me and talking about these New 52 books. New 52 was an interesting time for DC, and I know there's a lot of people that really love a lot of those books, so it's fun for me to talk about this stuff. Now, if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, I'm asking again, please consider to do so. Click that button down below, click the bell so you can be notified about more videos like this one that will be coming out every single week. And as always, everyone stay healthy, stay happy, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.